7:35 now, and Pix 11 is your local election headquarters. We want to make it easier for New Yorkers to make an informed decision in the upcoming race for mayor.
Yeah, we are introducing you to each of the candidates and finding out where they stand on the issues that matter most to you. So this morning, we're talking to former Comptroller Scott Stringer, who joins us in the studio to discuss his plan for making New York more affordable, and New Yorkers certainly want that. So thanks again for taking the time.
Great to be here. Good morning.
Be with us.
Good morning.
So we've been already reporting last night, the Rent Guidelines Board met and they proposed increases for nearly 1 million rent stabilized folks. And we're talking about affordability. What's your stance on rent guidelines?
Look, I'm a born and raised New Yorker, and I have seen since I was a kid just how difficult it is for parents to stay in the city. You know, once you have the second kid, you got to move because the rent's too high. There's an affordability crisis. So we need a mayor who's going to use his experience, turn that into action, and build the next generation of affordable housing. We're so minimalist in our thinking when it comes to affordable housing, city government is, and that we're not building the housing that we need. So my idea, my proposal, my dream is to build Mitchell-Lama 2.0. You know, those big Mitchell-Lama buildings that basically housed 400,000 people and 100,000 units. Let's take the vacant city-owned land. Let's repurpose that land. Let not-for-profits and limited profit developers build the next generation of integrated affordable housing. That's how we did it decades ago. We have to do that now. We need a mayor who knows how to do this.
But for those folks that are in rent-stabilized units, are you supportive of a rent freeze right now?
I am. The data suggests that a rent freeze for this year would be appropriate. There's always the caveat that you got to look at the data so that we get this right. But all indications are that the proposals just seem too high. And who's going to get hurt? The working people, the middle class. That's why we lost 500,000 people who left the city. It wasn't the billionaires who left. They just bought a second home. But it's the people who built this city, the seniors. And if we're not careful, we're going to have a city for the very, very wealthy, with enclaves for the very poor, and nothing in between. So mayors always thought big when it came to affordable housing, right? They built public housing, built Mitchell-Lama, rebuilt the Bronx at a time when people were abandoning buildings. As mayor, I'm going to use my experience as the city's former chief fiscal officer, someone as borough president who knew how to invest in affordable housing, and that's what I'm going to do on day one. And you need skill and experience to actually make promises come true.
Another campaign cornerstone, of course, is childcare. Very expensive for many New Yorkers. One of your plans to drive down that cost is to, one way, extend the school day. What would that look like?
Look, I'm a public school dad. I've got skin in the game. I've got 2 kids who are in middle school. They do not support my extended school day proposal. They've made it clear, but their mother does. And like so many working people, having our kids stay a little later in school will allow parents the flexibility to stay in the workplace. That helps children, but it also helps kids. Think about this. Our kids need extra tutoring.
Yeah.
After COVID, they need all the instruction that they can get. They also need after-school programs. They need athletics. Look, they need chess in the schools. We can really build out a school formula that will keep people in the city and educate our kids. Here's my plan. Try share childcare. Let's build a childcare program that could cut childcare costs by 50%. Let's baseline 3K and pre-K. Let's extend the school day. You know what that does? That gives our kids the fighting chance to make it in this town, and it keeps parents working in the city. That's my goal. And look, having kids in the public schools, I see it every day. I see what these kids need.
Yeah.
I see it with my kids' friends. And there's nothing more important than a mayor who really understands what it's like to have a lived experience in the public school system.
Just real quickly, though, how does this compare to the plan that the mayor announced this week?
Well, look, the good news is I put forth my proposals. The best compliment you get is mayors and others who follow your lead. That's what I did as controller for 8 years when I issued my programs and audits. It was very satisfying that others follow. Look, it's the best compliment you can get. But look, we're going to need a mayor who can build an administration, build a policy operation that actually can realize some of this. You know, part of the problem in a mayoral debate is it's a $150 billion budget, right?
Yeah.
By the time us candidates are done with the 2-hour debate, we've already spent $250 billion. So we need somebody who could sort of manage this in a realistic way. So when I issue a proposal, it's through the lens of how we actually finance and implement the program.
You know, to public safety now. Just yesterday, the NYPD swore in its new recruits. As you know, the largest police force in the country, some 34,000 officers, and you and others support expanding that. Why and how would you go about doing so?
Well, look, we have a overtime budget in the police department that's now $1.3 billion. Just in the last 4 years, we went from $650 million in overtime to $1.3 billion. One of the reasons why is we don't have enough police. We have the lowest police count in a generation, 33,461. Not to get controllery on you, but those numbers tell me that we need to hire 3,000 more police officers to reduce overtime in half, use those savings to build out the biggest mental health program to help the people who are languishing on the subways, living in the subways. We need the resources to build mental health workers as well as the police force. And let's do something we haven't done in a while. Let's just be smart on policing. In terms of recruits, 60,000 people took the sanitation test. 60,000.
Yeah.
10,000, 8,000 took the police test. Do you see? No one wants to be a cop, and the young police officers are leaving because of work schedules, because of we don't have staggered schedules. 20% of the workforce are women. Where's the child care for their children? So as mayor, you have to think strategically about how you rebuild the police force in a just and fair way, but also invest in aligning policing and mental health, and I can do that.
Okay, there's a few things. We've talked about affordability. We talked about public safety. We have not talked about immigration, but all those things put together, we're curious to see if you do get elected mayor, how will you work with the Trump administration and the policies that they've already put in place?
Look, as mayor, you got to work with Washington. You got to play chess, not checkers, both in D.C. and in the state. I have experience working across the aisle. When I was in the state assembly, I didn't have a Democratic Senate to work with. I had to work with Republicans, and I did it fairly well, passed a lot of legislation. So I understand the politics of the moment, but here's what we also need. We need someone who will draw the line in the sand to Donald Trump. You are not going to come in here and dictate how you're going to divide New Yorkers, take people away in the middle of the night. This is not how democracy works. So I will be a staunch defender of this city and the people who live here. I'll know when to work with them, but I'll know how to organize and stop them. I did Trump 1, and I did it pretty well. While they were telling us what to cut and what to do, as controller, I divested $4 billion from the fossil fuel industry. I divested from gun manufacturers, divested from private prisons. And while I was doing that, I also made sure we had a 9% return for the people who rely on our pensions for their retirement security. Right now, Trump, through the tariff fiasco, has cost this country trillions of dollars. A lot of that money came out of people's 401ks and their lifetime of savings. So as mayor, the experience I have as a former chief financial officer of the city, I'll meet Trump where he is, in the budget codes, in the trenches financially. That's what we need in the next mayor.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Scott Stringer, thanks again for that closer look at your campaign for mayor. And coming up on next week, we'll get to know candidate Zelnor Myrie when he joins us on the Pix 11 Morning News Tuesday at 7:30 a.m.